What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for another week of the NFL Weekly, week 13 to be exact, as we get closer and closer to the new year. And then, of course, the new year also means playoff football. And of course, middle of February means the Super Bowl. We'll be with you all the way until then. But let's get you ready for week 13. And when I say we, I mean, of course, myself and my co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Raider Jim at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great. A little bit cloudy outside and a little cool, but if that's my biggest problem, then I've got nothing to complain about. Who'd have thought it would already be December?
Unbelievable.
That what a flash it's been.
It's nothing speeds up the calendar like an NFL season. I'll tell you that right now. It's hard to believe that it's week 13. I feel like it was just yesterday that we were recording the preseason podcast, but we have a pretty good idea of how things are going to shake out, or at least we hope we do. Coach Brandon Lupian will be hopping on a little later when we can talk about the Saints there as well. But let's dive straight in, not yet to the games, but want to take a little moment to check in with Raider Jim. Obviously, it's been a tough year in Vegas for the Raiders. But what are your thoughts as we get ready for week 13 on the Raiders situation?
When we talked basketball yesterday, our basketball podcast in the paint, you used the word cohesive, and I thought that's a great word that applies, in so many facets of life. For the Raiders, they have not been a cohesive unit at all, not even close to what they were last year when it was down to the last play of the last game, but they did end up in the playoffs. This year, they had all the tools, brought in Adams, and by gosh, it's just now that they're starting to come into their own. They put together a couple decent games. After 4 years of on and off again and some inconsistency and injury, Josh Jacobs is running like a madman. He has got value, if nothing else. If the Raiders don't keep him, he's got value out there in the market. So congratulations to him. Again, is it too little too late? I have to be honest and say yes, it certainly is. But can they at least go out and finish with a bang? I think they can do that as well. So we'll see what the next few weeks holds. But am I disappointed? Of course I am. You can't go into the playoffs last year, pick up Adams, and then you just watch injuries, you watch inconsistencies. You don't see that cohesiveness that you talked about.
Yeah, it's rather ironic. I feel like over the last 2 or 3 years, if you had a Josh Jacobs running the way he is right now, the Raiders may have been a playoff or won a playoff game. It's kind of like you said, a little too late. Seems like they don't get everything clicking at once. It's one thing over here, one thing over there, and that's unfortunate.
And
Myself, yeah.
quite honestly, that you could say this about, with the exception, of course, of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. The hype of the AFC West, oh my God, that's going to be such a division that's going to be to watch. You've got Russell Wilson, you've got Herbert, you've got Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, blah blah blah. It's all Kansas City's.
Yep. It's kind of ironic. I feel like a lot of what people expected the AFC West to be, it's kind of what the NFC East is, with four as of right now, before we head into week 13. And I hate this saying, but I'll use it just for the sake of it. If the season were to end today, all four NFC East teams are in the playoffs. That's pretty impressive, especially considering what 2 or 3 years ago it was a 6-9-1 Washington Commanders team that made the playoffs out of that division. So definitely a jump up for the East. And of course, at the top of that is my Philadelphia Eagles sitting at 10-1. It's been I don't want to say tumultuous last few weeks, but the first 8-9 games of the season, you didn't have a whole lot of nail biters. Well, the last 3 weeks have all been nail biters. And for the Eagles sitting at 10-1, you have to feel good. But the problem is you don't really have any room for error, because any little slip up, you go from the 1 seed down to the 5 seed. You go from home field advantage throughout the playoffs to probably not a single home playoff game. So the pressure is on every single week, and we'll get into it here. The first game we talk about, but the Eagles will have a big test this week. I don't think it's too surprising to see the Eagles, I don't want to say struggle, but maybe come back down to earth over the past few weeks. The first 8-9 games of the season, the Eagles were relatively healthy. And now it's starting to kind of catch up to him. We saw CJ Gardner-Johnson. He's out indefinitely with a lacerated kidney. Dallas Goedert is a few weeks away from returning. And then, of course, you have the big defensive tackle, Jordan Davis, who they're hopeful will return this week. But we shall see. So, the health can only last so long, and the Eagles rode it out as long as they did. But I do remember heading into the preseason podcast when I talked about it, I said, look, the way the schedule looks, the Eagles very well could be 10-0 heading into Green Bay.
Yes,
I don't think they will. And sure enough, 9-1, I would have killed for 9-1. I expected 8-2, 7-3, a couple little, hiccups throughout it. They only had one little hiccup. So for the Eagles, it's, I don't want to say smooth sailing, but you have to feel comfortable with what the Eagles are doing. We'd obviously love to be in the NFC South right now, where we'd have a 6-game lead or whatever that is. That's not the case, but it is what it is. And it's a perfect segue into the first game we are going to be talking about. It is the Tennessee Titans at the Philadelphia Eagles. Tennessee is plus 245 on the money line. The Eagles are minus 300. The lines have moved, so just keep that in mind. But we do see at the moment the Philadelphia Eagles are 4.5-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 44.5. I'll get this one started. I put my picks together, and I didn't check the new lines, but when I put this together, Philadelphia was 6.5-point favorites. I was very big on Tennessee at 6.5. I think this is more than likely going to be a field goal game. I still like Tennessee at 4.5, just because the Eagles struggled last week against the run, against the AJ Dillon and this running attack that's coming in for Tennessee is one of the best, if not the best, at least in the AFC. Derrick Henry obviously can run through just about anybody. So I would like to see the Eagles win this game. I expect the Eagles to win this game, but 4.5 is a little too much for me. I foresee this a 31-28 type ball game. And then that's perfect. I also do think we are going to see an over, and what I talked about, the Eagles defense so good over the first 9, 10, 11 weeks. It's not that they've been bad, but they haven't been on that same level the past few weeks. I think that somewhat continues, but at the same time, the Eagles, as we saw against Green Bay, they can put up points with pretty much anybody in football. So I do think we're going to definitely see some points here in this one. A huge game for both of these teams. Tennessee wants to really get some separation in their division. And as I mentioned, the Eagles, no room for error if they want to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So give me Tennessee plus 4.5 and give me over 44.5. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Tennessee heads to Philly.
Yeah, this won't be the make or break headline, but it'll definitely be a bold headline off to the side, and that is AJ Brown. Everybody's going to watch AJ Brown to see what he does. He had been a guy down there in Tennessee. He was their go-to receiver. All of a sudden, after 3 seasons, finds himself playing for the Eagles, finds himself with a great paycheck every week, and he's having himself a heck of a season. But again, he won't be the storyline. The storyline is going to be Derrick Henry against the Eagles defense. And that is going to be the key to this game. Tennessee, though, doesn't have enough diversity on offense, not enough consistency on offense to pull an upset. But definitely with Derrick Henry, they've got a way to stay in the game. But on the running game, the Eagles are running like madmen themselves. The 360 plus yards they put up last week, yikes. Tennessee defense is strong against the rush, but they're not strong enough to stop that. And the Eagles just have this great line going for them right now, and control. So, as much as I have the respect for Tennessee on all sides of the ball, I think the Eagles are just going to be a little too much. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say the game ball is going to go to the Eagles defensive line. So watch for that one. Henry's going to get his yards. Don't make no mistake about it. But he's going to get his yards, but the Eagles are going to get a few more. Like you, I like Philadelphia. Give me Tennessee. Give me an extra half point. So I'll take Tennessee plus 5. And I too think it's going to go over the 44.5.
Yeah, it's a great call. The offensive line, I'm not an offensive line historian or anything like that, but the most recent offensive line that I remember being this dominant, I go back to the 1998, 1999 Broncos with Terrell Davis and those guys, and it continued. I mean, it seemed like every year the Broncos were bringing in guys like Mike Anderson and guys who went on to other teams and couldn't do anything. But when they were on the Broncos, they were rushing for 1,000 yards because of that offensive line. Even the early 90s Dallas Cowboys, as much fun as it was to watch Emmett, Irvin, and Aikman, a lot of it was that offensive line. And we're seeing that with this Eagles team as well. Really, like I said, probably the most dominant offensive line performance I've seen in quite some time on Sunday night. So hopefully they can continue that as well. So moving forward into Raider Jim's jurisdiction, we have the LA Chargers. They will head to Vegas to take on the Raiders. The Chargers are minus 155 and the Raiders are plus 130. The line is the Chargers -1 and the over-under sits at 50.5. Nobody gets us started other than Raider Jim when we're talking Raider football. So Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Chargers head to the desert.
Chargers are putting together some good games of late. They're on a nice run. But they're the old adage, sometimes better lucky than good. Well, they happen to be both. They happen to be lucky and they happen to be good. And so that plays to their favor. The Raiders have finally put together 2 wins in a row. Nobody thought it was or a lot of the Raider Nation didn't think it would happen this year. And that's giving them a lot of confidence, and they want to get another division win. It's very important to win in the division, regardless of how your season's going. You want to compete well within your division. What's going to be the key here? The key for the Raiders is going to be the defensive line has to press Herbert. You can't give him a lot of time. The secondary still has their issues, but you got to press him. You've got to keep the LA offense, the Charger offense off of the field. In turn, you've got Josh Jacobs, who, as I said, has found his confidence, and the O-line has seen that, is recognizing that, and they're giving him a ton of support. They are pushing people around. That's really in their favor this week because the Chargers defense is giving up 5+ yards per carry. And all they have to do is execute like they have the last few weeks. Jacobs did sit out practice, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday. There was a little question on how his thigh, I believe, was doing, but apparently he's back. He's going to be 100% on Sunday. They're playing at home, and I think they're at the very least they're playing for posterity and wanting to give the fans, the hometown fans, their money's worth.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting in this one. I feel like the Chargers are like kind of a chameleon team. They will play up to their opponents, but they will also play down to their opponents. We saw the Jaguar game, but then we also saw the 49er game on Sunday Night Football. And for 3 quarters, they were the better team. Didn't get the W, but this is a team that seems like they're showing up and putting, I don't want to say effort, but the result is always going to be close with the Chargers. And for the Raiders, you talked about it. Look, the playoffs are done. They're not going to make the playoffs, but it's time to play spoiler. And Josh McDaniels, 2 wins in a row. He's still maybe coaching for his job. And I think if you're the Raider brass, you want him to think that, even if you're already ready to give him another chance, but you kind of want to put him in that pressure situation. But it's been 2 weeks in a row now where the Raiders not only won, but they've won in, very exciting fashion. The 70-yard touchdowns, it seems, or 50-yard touchdown. First it was Devontae Adams, and then it was, of course, Josh Jacobs in those walk-off winners. So we'll see. Obviously, if you're a Charger fan and it goes to overtime, you got to be just scared out of your mind because the Raiders seem to just be the overtime kings. But at the end of the day, 1 point, essentially a pick 'em. I'm going to take the Chargers. I just think they have too much talent. I think even with their injuries, they're able to kind of fill those gaps here and there. But it will be very interesting because there is a lot of chatter coming out of LA and the Charger compound, or a lot of rumors that, if I'm blank, Brandon Staley doesn't get the job done and doesn't take this team to the playoffs, they're going to cut ties with him. And I've heard a lot about Sean Payton and the LA Chargers, and that would be something, if you're a Charger fan, you have to feel good about. However, it's almost kind of like sacrifice, right? If the Chargers go on and they make the playoffs this year, they're not going to get rid of Brandon Staley. So it's kind of like, do we want Sean Payton in the long run? Then we may have to lose out, something like that. So, but in terms of the score here, I do like the Chargers to get the job done. I do like the under here, though. I think 50.5 is a bit much for these teams, especially in a divisional game. I know both of these offenses can score. But I mean, I'm looking at, a 28-21 doesn't get you there. And that's kind of crazy in the over under. So I'll take the under here. I think it's going to be a really, really good game. Vegas is going to be excited to kind of, even a lot of their fans definitely want to see as many wins as possible. Although I know myself as a fan of my team, the minute you're eliminated from playoff contention, I've always said this, you tank. Because there's the worst place to be in the NFL is 8-8 or 8-9, because you're not making the playoffs and you're not dropped in the top 10. So it's a little tough there, but you also can't sell that to 52 competitors that, hey, you know what, we need a higher draft pick, so I need you to go out and give me 50%. That's not the way it works. So moving on, we are going to push the Monday Night Football Saints Buccaneers game back just a little bit as we wait for Coach. But we are going to have a really, really interesting matchup to talk about right here. The Miami Dolphins at the San Francisco 49ers. The Dolphins currently plus 170 money line, minus 200 for San Francisco. In terms of the spread, the Niners are 3.5-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 46.5. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors on this one. Who you like here? Dolphins heading to Santa Clara to take on the Niners.
This is going to be quite a game, I think. Tagovailoa, he's liking his new friends out there. He likes Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and what quarterback wouldn't like to be able to stand back and say, gee, who do I want to throw to this time? He's got a passer rating of 115 plus. It looks like an MVP candidate, quite honestly, the way he's been playing. Dolphins are playing very good, very aggressive football. They've averaged plus 30 over their last 4 games. However, on Sunday, they're going into San Francisco. Now, so what are they going up against on Sunday? They're going up against the defense that's number 1 in points allowed, number 1 in yards per game. And add to that, it is going to be raining in San Francisco. And I will tell you, to this day in my life, one of the coldest baseball games I ever went to was in the middle of July at Old Candlestick Park, and I thought I was going to freeze to death. So I can't imagine what it's going to be like game time on Sunday. If it's, it's supposed to be 80% chance, which means, yeah, it's going to rain, and it's probably going to be a pretty decent rain. So in this one, I do think that the 49ers are going to come out, control it on defense. They're going to give up some plays, but they're going to stay in control on the defensive side of the ball. The offense is going to put up just enough points. I do like San Francisco minus 2.5 in this one. And I think because of the weather conditions, and they just don't score a lot of points anyway on the 49er side of the ball, under 47.
Agreed. I'm under for sure on this one. I think as good as Tua's been and as good as this Dolphin offense is, the weather will be a factor. And I also think the way the Niners, I think, defensively are going to attack the Dolphins is almost an umbrella. They'll give you those 5, 6, 7-yard crossing routes, but they're not going to let Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle get beyond those safeties and into the next level. And I think that may change kind of the thought process. And I will say, I don't know if there's been enough credit given to what Mike McDaniel has done. And I will be the first one to admit, I kind of laughed at this, kind of scoffed at the hiring of Mike McDaniel. He's a really funny guy, but he doesn't necessarily look like a football coach. He kind of looks like a nerd. I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm sure he would admit the same, but at the same time, you can't judge a book by its cover. And at the very least, he has gotten those guys on the same page. The record speaks for itself. but this is a huge ask. The San Francisco 49ers, for my money, are the best team in the NFC. And yes, I'm saying that as an Eagles fan. The Niners kind of turning things around is a very scary proposition, and they've definitely figured things out. And the crazy thing is we've only really seen Christian McCaffrey really have a good game once since he's been acquired. So you have to imagine at some point he's going to start clicking, and that spells terror for the NFC. I like the Niners. I like -3. But I do like the under a lot. I think we're going to see a bit of a slugfest, and I think at the end of the day, it's kind of a matchup of styles. We pull up the boxer kind of thing. You got the Niners, who are a big kind of haymaker, and they're going to kind of beat you up on the ropes, things like that. And the Dolphins are more that Floyd Mayweather. They're going to dance around and, tag you here and there, but they do not want to stand right in front of the Niners and take those punches left and right, because they will get knocked out very quickly in this one. So it's going to be a very good game. A lot of really good games this weekend. And this next one is definitely no different. A rematch of last year's AFC title game, except it'll be in Cincinnati this year. But the Kansas City Chiefs will head to Cincinnati. The Chiefs currently -160, Bengals +135. The line is Kansas City -2.5, and the over-under is 52.5. Raider Jim, this is an AFC West team, so that's your jurisdiction. The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, I think if you look at these two teams, it's pretty simple and it's very obvious. Much better than the Rams this season, of course, but like the Rams, Cincinnati has shown that they are very much human. And fur coats and sunglasses and bling and cigars in the locker room are only going to take you so far. They're going to get you headlines and pictures and a lot of fans to follow you on Twitter, but they're not going to get you to the playoffs. They're not going to win a Super Bowl for you. On the other side of it, you've got the guys that go to work: Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, the offensive line, Andy Reid. As exciting as this game should be, I don't think it's going to be that exciting. I'm really surprised for the 10 games we're going to talk about, understanding that a percentage are inside. Some of these outside games, weather's not going to be a factor. Weather is not going to be a factor at Cincinnati. Kansas City, you can tell it's in his eyes. It's in Patrick Mahomes' eyes. They're going to go out, they're going to execute, they're going to play as close to flawless as they can. If they make a mistake, they don't get rattled. They just go back, execute the same play all over again until they get it right, or adjust and get it right. So I think in this one, what you're going to see is, right now it's Kansas City -2.5. Over under is 52.5. I definitely like Kansas City on the over under, and I will take over 52 in this one.
I agree. My dad always used to say, don't pump your own tires, in terms of, talking about what you got right and blah, blah, blah. But I will for a moment, because when we did the preseason pod, that was kind of my one. I don't know if it was, I just said it off the cuff, or we were talking about, some bold predictions we made. And I said, Cincinnati, I think they're going to regress a bit this year. They're going to be the Super Bowl hangover, which is kind of ironic, because as much as they're struggling, the defending Super Bowl champs are on a whole nother level of struggling. So, but for Cincinnati, this is a game where you just almost want to survive. Kansas City is playing probably the best football in all of the league right now. Pretty much everybody's power rankings have them as number one, even though the Eagles have a better record. And you know what? I can't argue with that. You got Patrick Mahomes, you got Kelce, and you also have a defense that continues to improve. I mean, we look at the first Super Bowl Patrick Mahomes won. They won in spite of their defense. They're continuing, this route. Now they're going to win probably because of what Patrick Mahomes does, but that defense is also going to have a hand in it as well. So I'm very surprised it's only 2.5. I'm going to take Kansas City all day. And I also do like the over 52.5. Cincinnati will put some points up, as of course will Kansas City. And we have a chance that, if things fall correctly and, the Kansas City defense maybe does struggle a little bit today, we could see a big time shootout in this one. Both offenses are obviously ready to roll. Fingers crossed that we do see the return of Jamar Chase, although there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about that, but he is getting close to hopefully returning not only for the Bengals, but also for my fantasy team. So Godspeed, sir. But yeah, I even if he does play in this one, I don't think he's enough to get the Bengals into the win column. Kansas City, I believe, will cover this one. Anything, I mean, I'd probably even go up to 5 in this one. I just think Kansas City is so much better than a lot of teams, Cincinnati included, but going to have a real opportunity to see a shootout here going over 52.5 in my mind. So moving on to one of the more lopsided games we're going to be talking about this weekend. It's the Indianapolis Colts at the Dallas Cowboys. Indy is plus 310, Dallas minus 390 on the money line side of things. The spread is all the way up to Dallas 10.5 point favorites, and the over under sits at 43.5. Obviously, NFC East is my jurisdiction, so I'll get this one started. And as an Eagle fan, I'm afraid of the Niners, but I am definitely afraid of what the Cowboys are putting together, only because that's an immediate worry rather than the Niners. The Niners are a January worry. But right now, the Cowboys right on the Eagles' heels. They're playing very good football. That defense continues to dominate each and every game. They start maybe a little slow. If I'm picking one thing from the Cowboys that I could pick out, they are a very slow starting team. We saw on Thanksgiving, I think halftime they were down 10-7, ended up figuring things out and getting the win. But I don't think that will matter in this one. Indy had a good few weeks. They looked good, but I think we're starting to see some chinks in the armor of Jeff Saturday. Personally, Monday night, I would have used a timeout in those moments. But I also understand Jeff Saturday forgets more about football than I'll ever know. So it's hard to second guess somebody like that. But I do think that luster has kind of wore off of the feel good story. I think the Cowboys get the job done. 10.5 here, though. I like Indy. I'm just gonna say it like it is. Oh no, I'm sorry. No, I apologize. Take that back. I like the Cowboys in this one, and I know it is a lot. That's a heavy spread, but I just think the Cowboys have two things going for them. They have Dak back, and obviously leading that offense with the two-headed monster of Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. But they also have the kind of carrot in front of them of, look, we're going to have to win out if we really want a chance to win this division. And that's something that's going to drive this team week in and week out. You know, there's some teams in the NFC South that maybe know, you know what? It's not do or die this week. More than likely one or two other teams going to lose, not so much in the NFC East. So give me the Cowboys to cover the big spread. In terms of the over-under, I like the under. 43.5. I'm looking at Indy. How are they going to score some points? I could see this being a 24-10, 24-7 type game. Dallas covers, and we're well under that. I mean, even 24-14, we're still good there. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Dallas hosting the Colts.
Yeah, it's real easy stat for me to make the decision. First of all, the Colts are as bad as everybody was afraid they could end up. They have given up 43 sacks this season. Dallas has registered 45 sacks, and that's the game right there. Colts have also surrendered 21 turnovers. What do you say? They can't help but make mistakes, and you can't make mistakes against this Dallas team. A couple weeks back, I picked the Colts to cover the spread, and it was a pretty big spread. I believe it was like an 8.5, 9 points. I was like, surely they can't lose by that much, and they did. And I think they will in this one. I like Dallas minus 10.5 on this one. And like you, I do like the under. Give me half point, give me under 44, but I still like the under. I don't think Indianapolis is going to score.
Yeah, it's a big ask for any team because, like I said, Dallas is a really, really good defense, but this is probably one of the bigger mismatches on paper. And then, as you said, the sack situation, not ideal when you have an offensive line that looks like Swiss cheese, and then you have a defense that is an absolute buzzsaw. I'm going to go in favor of the defense. But moving on to the other NFC East matchup. It's an interdivision matchup. You got the Washington Commanders at the New York Giants. Currently, the Commanders are 2.5 point favorites, and the over-under sits at 40.5. This is an interesting one for me. Obviously, the Giants have been playing good football. They're going to be at home in this one, and they're right in the thick of a playoff race. Same with Washington. I looked up Chase Young's status, and it's ironic because one of the first articles I saw was the MetLife Stadium's turf may actually be the reason why Chase Young does not play this week. They have, I think they called it a split turf or a slit turf. Anyways, the Players Association has actually petitioned the NFL to ban these types of fields. They had, I think it was like a 16 or 20% higher increase in lower body non-contact injuries on these fields. And when you hear non-contact injuries, those are scary because that's usually one of the CLs, ACL, MCL, PCL. So keep that in mind. But the defensive line for Washington is the strength of this team. And then the strength of the Giants is going to be the run game. I think that plays towards the Commanders' favor. I think you force Daniel Jones to beat you. And while Daniel Jones has improved over from last year, I'd prefer Daniel Jones to beat me rather than Saquon Barkley. 2.5 here for Washington. You know what? I like that. I could see Washington getting a late field goal to win this game. In terms of 40.5, though, I like the under. I think it's going to be more of a slugfest. Two teams that don't want to make the big mistake, two quarterbacks that are quote unquote game managers, and they're going to focus heavily on the run. That for me spells a 20-17 type game that will, keep us under that. So give me Washington and give me the under. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Commanders versus Giants.
Yeah, it's who would have thought that here we are, week 13, and after the way the season started, you would only have a 1-game difference between these two teams in their records, and that you would see the Giants at home and the underdog. That's there it is. That's what's happening in the NFL this year, I guess, in some areas. I do like the Giants in this one. I think Barkley's going to step up and have them a real good game. I think he's going to keep them in it, and I think they're going to control the ball, and that is what's going to be to their favor. Just keep Washington's offense off the field. I think they're going to play strong. I don't think it's going to be a slugfest as far as, a shootout. But I do like at home, give me +3 for the Giants, under 41. And I think that's going to be not a bad game.
Yeah, it's going to be there's a lot of really good games this week. This is definitely towards the top. And as you said, week 3 or 4, we would have laughed at you if you would have said Washington at New York would be one of the games we're talking about here on this show, especially with Washington. I think they were 1-4 to start the season. They're now 7-5. Once again, and we bring it up every time we talk about the Commanders. The job Ron Rivera is doing there is fantastic. He is really one of the best coaches out there. And hats off to him. Really a great human being as well, from what I've heard and dealt with. So moving on to another one of these kind of quote unquote mismatches. You got the Denver Broncos at the Baltimore Ravens. The spread has the Ravens as 8.5-point favorites, and the over under is a paltry 39.5. We are talking AFC West football. So we are going to Raider Jim first. What are your thoughts, Raider Jim? Broncos heading to Baltimore.
Yeah, one of these fascinating facts I read as I was doing some homework before we got started. In 10 seasons at Seattle, Russell Wilson was averaging at minimum 20 touchdowns per season. Every season. He has thrown 10 this year. There's no way he's going to get to the 20 number. And it's just this program. I don't know if it's the coaches. I don't know if it's the familiarity. I don't know if it's his, supporting cast around him. But wow, Denver is not at all what anybody, including me, thought that they would be at this, 13 weeks into the season against Baltimore, who they're, again, as we said about Kansas City, what are they doing? They're going out every week. They bring their lunch pails. They open, they do their job. They're just getting the jobs done. Jackson is still playing well. My only concern about the spread in this one is Jackson did pull himself out of practice, I guess, yesterday with an upper thigh injury is what I believe I read. And so he's not questionable for the game. It's just if he's going to be 100% or not. But against Denver, 90% of Lamar Jackson's going to probably be all you need. And I think they'll put on just enough points. But I think that Denver will stay in this one. Give me half a point. Give me Denver +9 to cover the spread, but under 39.5 for sure.
Yeah. I have real questions about Baltimore overall, because look, if we play 3 quarters, this team may be the best in football record wise. They may be undefeated. I didn't go back and look, but they've lost 3 or 4 games that they not only should have won, but were in the 80s in terms of percent to win the game or expected win percentage. And that kind of scares me against the team. And I know Russell Wilson is struggling. There's all over on social media. It's, will he throw more touchdowns than he has bathrooms in his house? At the moment, I believe it's 12-9. Bathrooms are leading. So keep an eye on that. That may be the only thing you have to worry about if you are a Bronco fan down the stretch. But I do think that, like you, the Ravens are going to win this game. But I think 8.5 is a bit much. They win by a touchdown. I could see that happening. And the Broncos are still going to cover. So give me Denver +8.5. I do like the under here, though. I just, with what you brought up, with maybe some fatigue or something up with Lamar, no matter what that is, that may go to it. But I also look at this as 2 teams and that aren't really, Baltimore isn't opening up the playbook against Denver. Obviously they want to win the game, but you're not going to see anything crazy. Every play that I think they run is already on film. I don't think they show anything new because I don't think they need to win this game to do that. But we shall see. But I will take the under. It is a low number, but once again, I just question how Denver is going to score. And Baltimore kind of, they leave a lot of points on the board. But once again, you look at this team and you should expect, wow, they should be doing so much better. And they're doing all right. But once again, they've had 3 or 4 games that they lost when they definitely should have won. So Baltimore, or I like Denver +8.5. And then give me the under 39.5. Moving on to the Deshaun Watson Bowl, if you will. The Cleveland Browns head to Houston to take on the Texans. Of course, this is the return, or at least he is eligible to return, Deshaun Watson. The Browns are 7-point favorites. The over-under sits at 46.5. I'll get this one started. Obviously, last year was the beginning of the Deshaun Watson legal battles, if you will. And I was very positive for the Texans and saying, you know what? The NFL hasn't suspended him. You could play him. It would be a PR nightmare, but you are allowed to play Deshaun Watson. You're already paying him. If you wanted to play him, or that's your right. They decided not to. And I was very, that's the right move, blah, blah, blah. And then in the offseason, it came out that the Houston Texans were giving NDAs to the masseuses for Deshaun Watson, which immediately says to me they knew what was going on. So I kind of have to walk back that praise that I had for them last year. But for the Browns and their struggles, that's called karma. You go out and you get a guy like Deshaun Watson with his past, and then you pay him what you did, and then you get upset when he gets suspended and you're without him for X number of games. Should have been longer. Probably should have been a whole year. And I know last year he didn't play, but that wasn't because of suspension. Felt like this should have been a whole year. If Calvin Ridley gets suspended for betting $1,000 on football, I think when 27 women come forward and say that man sexually assaulted me, I think that needs to be more than what $1,000 bet is. I think the NFL's priorities are incredibly out of line on that. But we're a podcast talking about how we look at things, from a betting side. So in this one, I think Houston can cover. I don't know if they can win, but I think they cover the 7. I like the over 46.5. I do think we are going to see some points being scored. Davis Mills probably taken some steps back. Last year showed some, I thought last year he may have been the best rookie quarterback, as crazy as that said. for the whole year. And Mac Jones definitely had better games here and there, but I think the whole of the season, I like Davis Mills. He's taken some steps back this year, but I think we will get enough points being scored to get over 46.5. And I just think Houston, this is, for better or worse, this is their Super Bowl. They've had this game circled. They want to go out and embarrass Deshaun Watson. And once again, they are not innocent in this, or at least the front office is not innocent in this Deshaun Watson saga. But at the very least, they want to go out and hang an L on Deshaun Watson's return. But I don't think it's possible, but I do think they cover. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? The Browns at the Texans.
Yeah, unfortunately for Houston, as great a storyline as this would be for them to see the prodigal son come home and then just beat him to a pulp in front of his former home crowd. Here's one of the issues, or perhaps the key issue here. Houston's defense gives up 169 yards rushing per game, and Nick Chubb is the number 3 rusher in the NFL right now. So whose favor do you think this is going to play out to? Chubb is they're not going to put the ball in the hands of Watson, even if he just plays a quarter or 2 quarters, and say, make magic happen. They're going to say, take a snap, throw a couple passes out in the flats, something safe, but just give the ball to the guy that runs. If you hand off the ball and don't fumble it, and we're going to be just fine. And the adjective I saw one writer used as far as Houston goes, they brought in Kyle Allen last week, and they said it didn't help their dreadful offense. So when they're using things like, words like dreadful, they point out, the obvious, which is the Houston defensive line is not good. This is all mad. The stars are lining up for Cleveland this week on the road, and I think they cover by 7, no problem. But I do think it's going to go over. I think you'll see some touchdowns. So give me Cleveland -7, over 46.5.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. I think if you're watching that game and you're enjoying it, I think you have to feel a little conflicted.
Right.
It's difficult. Like I said, I think most of us would have handled the suspension if we were the czar, the suspension czar, if you will. I think we would have handled it differently. But the NFL will continue to talk about how they are for everyone, this and that. And then you see things like this. It's just very, very hypocritical in my mind. But Deshaun Watson, for better or worse, is returning, or at least eligible to return this weekend. Second to last game we'll be talking about, you got the New York Jets at the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings 3.5-point favorites. The over-under sits at 44.5. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to get us started here. Jets at Vikings.
Interesting game, to say the least. Minnesota has that at-home 3-point, -3 favorite. And that's it. It's because they're at home. They actually, they're playing well. Don't get me wrong, on both sides of the ball. But of the last couple of weeks, there's been some inconsistency in the execution of the game plan, if you will. And on the other side of the ball, the Jets, they slip, fall, and somehow they hit the floor on one knee and come up still holding the tray full of drinks, and they've only spilled a couple drops. They do pretty good for themselves. I think it's going to be closer than people think. I'm half inclined to take the Jets on the money line on this one, but then it's like, nah, at some point the Vikings got to put it together. It's going to be this one. I think they're going to have a great offensive game, and that's going to be the difference. So I think you're going to see Minnesota cover the spread here. So Minnesota -3. I think it's going to go over, though. I think you'll see some points. So give me half a point on the over-under and give it over 44.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I believe the Vikings were on a bye week last week. So the last time that we saw the Vikings, they were getting demolished by the Cowboys in a game that really showed their flaws, if we're being honest. But I'll tell you this right now. The Jets, if I'm Mike White, after what he did last year, put up some good numbers and then got benched, and then did this again. He's someone looking around going, you got Joe Flacco and Zach Wilson here. I think you need to start looking at me as maybe the future, or at least the right now. I think the biggest thing with Zach Wilson, we go back to that Patriot game 2 weeks ago. They scored 3 points. They lost on a punt return, essentially, in the last seconds of the game. They asked Zach Wilson, do you think, you let your defense down this week? And he just said, no, I don't. And immediately lost his job. And first of all, for Saleh, I think that shows he is the leader in that locker room. He's going to stick up for the team, not the star, the team. But I always remember from a movie, Any Given Sunday. It's a great movie. Don't watch it with children, but it's a great movie. And Lawrence Taylor is in it, and he is one of the linebackers, or he plays one of the linebackers. And you have Jamie Foxx, who's the young upstart quarterback, and they go to a party at LT's house, or whatever his character's name is in the movie. And it got out that Willie Beeman, aka Jamie Foxx, was talking smack about the defense. So while Jamie Foxx is hanging out in the party, drinking this, blah, 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 someone comes up and goes, hey, come look at this. Well, Lawrence Taylor's character had taken a chainsaw or something and cut Jamie Foxx's car in half. And he said, look, football, you got two sides of it. You got the offense and you got the defense. They both need to be on the same page to win. And I think that's kind of what it is right now with the Jets and Zach Wilson. I just think he is that quote unquote privileged kid. I just think he's never once been told no. He's never once been told you need to work on this, or at the very least, he's never taken it seriously. We talked, you mentioned yesterday's podcast where I brought up cohesiveness. Well, I'll bring up yesterday's podcast where you brought up coachability. I can't imagine Zach Wilson is very coachable. Now, once again, I'll admittedly say I've never met Zach Wilson, never had a conversation with the human being. But from what I've seen in his career, it doesn't scream coachability. And that's scary, especially when you have a team that can cut and run real quick. They're ready to move on from Zach Wilson, I would say, very quickly. In terms of this game, I'm with you. I would love to put some money on the Jets, but at the same time, I just think the talent on the Vikings side is a little too much. I may just bet down a half a point to get me Minnesota minus 2.5 just to cover myself for a field goal game. In terms of the over-under, though, I do like the over here. I think we are going to see some points being scored. Once again, Mike White, I mean, at the very least, the kid can sling it. I don't know if, the film will catch up to him, but he's got an arm on him. And I think he's kind of playing with house money. He probably was thinking about retirement a few weeks ago, sitting behind Flacco and Wilson, and now he's kind of got an invigoration of his career. So we'll see how that goes. So I do like to see the over here. It's going to be a very interesting game in this one. Once again, this is another one, week 3 or 4. If I would have said, wow, we'd be looking at this as one of the bigger games, I think we would have been surprised, mainly on the Jets side of things, at least for myself. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like Coach is going to be able to make it on tonight, but we will talk about his Saints regardless, much to the chagrin of Raider Jim, who tried to get the Saints off of the podcast a few weeks ago when he was getting all lawyerish. But this is a Monday Night Football game. We have the New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a wide open NFC South at the moment. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 3.5-point favorites. The over-under sits at 40.5. And before I pass it over to Raider Jim, I just want to shout out the Saints. I'm very thankful for them to bring the cohesiveness of the podcast together, because I know Raider Jim was bumming earlier this year when the Raiders got shut out, and the Saints said, you know what? Let's even things out on the First Off the Bench podcast network. Let's shut ourselves out as well. And that's what happened. So as of right now, the Eagles are the only team that have not been shut out on the podcast this season, as I knock on wood vociferously. But with that being said, Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Monday Night Football, Saints heading to Tampa as 3.5-point underdogs.
Even with subpar records, this isn't going to be a bad game.
No.
It still has some excitement to it. Now, what I really like going into it, if you look a little behind the scenes, if you will, and the rumor mill is really a buzz. And there's talk of one of the most astounding comebacks that you would ever see. The Big Easy is in negotiations, or at least started negotiations, for a comeback of all people, Terrell Owens. And according to the front office, What they're saying is they think Terrell Owens and Alvin Kamara might be the 1-2 punch the Saints need.
What? Oh my goodness.
Get it? Terrell Owens. He just blasted the guy outside of CVS in LA. And I was like, what the heck? They can go out, it's the 1-2 punch they need. What a battery. The t-shirts galore. I can just see it if it happens. But yeah, Tampa Bay, Tom Brady needs 3 touchdowns. And with 3 touchdowns, he gets 100 touchdowns with the Buccaneers. And say what you will about the greatest of all time, you can't discount what he's accomplished. And I think he's going to get the 3 touchdowns this week. They're actually playing fairly consistent and definitely playing more consistent than the Saints have of late. I think that's going to be enough playing at home to give them the nod in this one. I like Tampa Bay -2.5. I like under 41 though, because I don't think it's going to be a big shootout.
Yeah, I saw last week, it was the first time in Tom Brady's career, his team who was leading with 2 minutes left in the game and they lost. I think that kind of is that it's kind of poking a bear, right? Like you beat somebody up. Well, you beat that bully up. Or I feel bad for the next kid that has to deal with that bully because he's going to take some frustrations out. And I think that's kind of the case here. I like Tampa Bay -3.5. I think they are the better team with or without Terrell Owens, which is, I mean, 10 years ago, I feel like that would have been a crazy conversation to have. And it's 2022 and we're still talking about T.O. I mean, look, he's in great shape. I've seen him be training and things like that. Best of luck to him. As an Eagle fan, I always have a soft spot for, Terrell
Absolutely.
Owens. Yeah, I kind of call him, he's like the line of craziness. Unfortunately, Antonio Brown went beyond that. But Terrell Owens is that one in terms of like the eccentricness. They always say if you're poor and crazy, you're just crazy. If you're rich and crazy, you're eccentric. That's kind of what Terrell Owens is right there. But in terms of this one, the game, I think the frustrating part for the Saints is they're talking about Terrell Owens, and the real struggle is they have a Terrell Owens like wide receiver who just hasn't been on the field over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's Michael Thomas. The fact that they're needing to look for that. And it is a little, I don't know if maybe they just don't think they're in the picture for him, but Odell Beckham is a name that's being tossed around a lot. He played at LSU, obviously, has the Louisiana ties to him. I don't know where he was born or anything like that, but he played football at LSU. So seems like that would be I would give Odell Beckham a call before Terrell Owens. Let me just put it to you that way, with all due respect to T.O. But give me the Buccaneers -3.5. I think they cover. I do like the over here. I think we are going to see some points being scored, even if it's the Saints kind of going back to their turnover ways again, even if it's that setting up short fields for Tampa Bay, or even pick sixes. I go back to that Thursday night game with Tampa Bay or with New Orleans, where it was, 2 pick sixes in the final 2 minutes of the first half for Andy Dalton. So that's kind of stuck in my mind. That could also push the over as well. So give me Tampa -3.5, over 40.5. For coach's sake, I hope they can pull one out for him, because I know it's been a rough few weeks for the Saints and for him. But with that, that is all we have for you on this edition of the NFL Weekly, week 13 to be exact. But let's leave you with some final thoughts. Raider Jim, I'll give you the floor first.
Again, week 13, who'd have thought we'd get here this fast? And thankful that we're all in one piece. Thanksgiving was great. Going forward, I know we'll try to get on our good friend, our other great friend, Officer Jim Bentoncourt from the California Highway Patrol, to do our public service announcement and remind all of us, holiday season, it's a time to be happy and celebrate that we're on the other side, hopefully, of COVID. But we still need to keep our wits about ourselves, exercise common sense, drink and drive.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to bring up Officer Betancourt as well. Just the holidays are about being with family, and don't be the reason someone doesn't have their family member, or be the reason that you're not there. As I've always said, if you can afford to go out and drink, you can afford the Uber. And believe me, I know Ubers have gone up no doubt about it there, but you can still afford that. And just be responsible. And also too, as a former bartender, look, if you're at a bar and you've had too much and you drove there and you order an Uber and you're worried about your car being towed, I guarantee you, if you talk to a bartender, they will figure out a way to make sure that your car is safe overnight. And once again, if that's the biggest reason, sleep in your car then, goodness gracious. Don't be stupid. Don't ruin somebody's life. Don't ruin your life. Even if you don't hit anybody or anything like that, you just get pulled over. That's about a $20,000 bill minimum. So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, please be safe this holiday season. And we'll be probably reminding you up until, the January podcast about that as well. But you can't hammer home that point enough. Please be safe when you are celebrating. Do not drink and drive. But with that, thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the NFL Weekly presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It's time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great week. Take care.
Peace and be safe.